Okay. All right, it says we are now streaming on Facebook Live, so let's just hope we're live. Now, let me just see if I get, are we streaming? All right, welcome, 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 everybody. I am so excited to introduce this week to you. We are gonna do a lot of interviews from women and one guy who I've invited to speak at our Conquer conference in October. And we just thought we would celebrate this week as just a preview week for you to be able to just meet some of the wonderful, amazing people that I've invited to share with you. And I was very intentional. Of course, I'm going to share with you at the conference. Of course, my coaches are going to share with you. But I wanted to give you some other people to listen to. And one of the people that I wanted you to hear was a dear friend of mine, Carol Kent. And Carol, we were just chatting ahead of time. I'm not sure if you remember this, but Carol Kent and I, she wouldn't have remembered me, but I definitely remembered her. We met at my very first, so I went to a conference, just like our Conquer conference. I went to a writers and speakers conference called ASA. And Carol was there. And of course, she was a very well-known writer and speaker. I hadn't even put a book out yet. And it was in 1999. And I remember, Carol, that you were there and you had just encountered the incident that changed your entire life. And Carol has been a prolific Bible study teacher, a prolific author and speaker, and she was going gangbusters for the Lord when her whole life turned upside down. And because I've watched Carol live that out for 20 years, I've watched how I saw her in that moment. She didn't know me, but I had my hands on your shoulders, Carol, and I was praying for you that day too, as everyone else in that group was. And so tell us a little bit about what it felt like to, because some of the women who are, all of the women in our group, Conquer, you know, I've shared with you, they're in abusive marriages. Some of them are leaving, some of them are trying to stay. Their worlds have turned upside down. It's not the life they thought they were going to have. And so I couldn't think of a better person who has walked that through now for 20 years, that this is not the life you signed up for. This is not the life you wanted. This is not the life you thought was going to happen. And yet you're here at this side of 20 years later, and it's not changed really, but you've changed. And so I would love for you to just share what happened in 1999 and how that felt to have your whole world crumble.
Well, Leslie, it's hard for me to believe that we have known each other for a little more than 2 decades, and it is such an honor to share with your Conquer group these remarkable women who are looking for answers and trying to figure out how best to carry on in the middle of very difficult circumstances. And I just, first of all, want to say to all of you, I feel so honored to be a part of your event this fall and to be able to share. But my crisis came that very fall that I met Leslie, as she mentioned earlier. As you know, she mentioned that I'm a public speaker, and we had been in St. Louis for the weekend, and we came home on a Sunday night just exhausted. And I remember falling into bed, and I was sound asleep when this very intrusive ringing of the phone started. And I looked at the clock. It was 12:35 a.m. And I saw my husband pick up the receiver, and he had a look of shock and horror come over his face. And he pulled the receiver away from his ear and he said, "Carol, Jason has just been arrested for the murder of his wife's first husband. He's in the jail in Orlando." And I'm going to backtrack a little bit because I literally went into shock. I had never been in a crisis like this before. I remember nausea sweeping over me. I tried to get out of bed. My legs would not hold my weight. I just remember crawling my way into my office, and while still on the floor, I grabbed the phone. I called the Orlando, Florida jail, and when someone finally answered and I asked about my boy, a rude voice on the other end of the line said, "Lady, we ain't got nobody by that name. Jason Kent in here. Lady, your son ain't here." And Leslie, for just a moment, my hopes returned. I thought maybe I'm living in the middle of a horrific nightmare. I'm going to wake up and everything is going to be okay. But everything was not okay. My son had pulled a trigger in a public parking lot and a man had died. Now, I'm sure those of you listening to us right now are wondering, why? why did my son do this? How could he have been raised in a good Christian home? And he was a graduate of the Naval Academy, and he was a boy who never got into trouble. How could this have happened? And Leslie, it really goes back to his marriage. He fell in love with a previously married woman with two precious little girls, a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old. There were multiple allegations involving the biological father, and the allegations were about the girls as well as about their mama, Jason's new wife. And he had only been granted supervised visitation. But as we know, a dad can appear very good in a supervised setting. And after several months of visitation, it appeared that his behavior had been such that a judge was going to grant him unsupervised visitation. And our son had recently gotten his military orders for his first assignment outside of the continental USA. And that was going to be Hawaii. And that would mean 6-week visits in the summer with a biological father that Jason and his wife believed to be abusive. And I say believed to be abusive because April didn't have any money on her own. She was married at the age of 16. She had babies very quickly after she married. She had no money. She didn't really know about social services and that she could ask for help without any money and get help. So she lived in a lot of fear. And I'm guessing a whole lot of you listening to me right now have lived in a whole lot of fear. And so you know what that feels like and how obsessive it can be. And Jason wanted to protect his girls. He wanted to protect his wife. And he wound up making a devastating choice that truly changed the rest of his life as well as the rest of our lives.
Oh my gosh, I just remember that. And I, I mean, there's several different tracks, and, I just think of the horror and the fear and the humiliation because you're so well known, everybody knows, and the heartache. And I mean, this is your only child. This is your only, family, grandchildren, all of that. And everything changed after that. It just, I mean, your whole world, you had to create a new normal. And how did you get from where you were in 1999 to where you felt more stable? And how did you get there? I mean, that's what we're going to talk about in the Conquer Conference. So don't give away all the secrets, but Carol is an amazing woman, and well, you're so tenderhearted about all of this and so vulnerable that I so appreciate that, because I want our Conquer sisters to hear two things. Carol did not do this alone. And so our theme for our conference, We Grow Stronger Together. I wasn't one of your inner circle girlfriends, but I know you had them because they contacted all of us so we could pray. So, because you just couldn't think. You had some inner girlfriends who held up your body and held up your arms. And talk a little bit about that. And I think the other thing is that you had some hard decisions to make about how you were going to walk this out. And that's part of what we want to talk about in Conquer, is that we might not have the choices to not be in this situation, but we have the choice of how we're going to be in the situation. And so I would love for you to share some of that.
Well, I think probably one of the most shocking things to me is that I had this feeling of not being able to breathe. It was like having to remind myself to take in air. And I'm a firstborn of 6 preacher's kids. And Leslie, that means I'm bossy. That means you can probably give me an assignment. And even if I don't know how to figure out what you need, I can find out how to make it happen. So I was used to being in charge and in control. And suddenly the bottom dropped out of my life. I felt like I couldn't hold more than one thought in my head at a time. I felt so handicapped in terms of my ability to do rational thinking in the middle of the crisis. And trauma
does that to you. I mean, you were traumatized.
It was horrible. And it was a feeling of wanting to crawl under the covers and never come out again. I felt like I didn't want to answer my door because I didn't know who was on the other side of it. And I felt embarrassed to see friends. I felt awkward about even deliveries coming to my door because I didn't know who would be bringing those deliveries. It was a feeling of not being myself, of being this totally different fearful, anxiety ridden woman, and I had never ever been like that before, and so the lack of control was a big issue in the beginning, and I remember needing help, and finally coming to that point of knowing I could not do this by myself. This was not the kind of thing where you can pat yourself up and put on the plastic smile and everything's going to be okay. You can do that for a little while, but it doesn't last very long when you live in the middle of a crisis. And I just know there are probably a whole lot of women watching us right now who feel the same way, that it would be very, very difficult to be able to carry on. And there were two friends who first came alongside. One was Becky from Texas, and there was Kathy from Arizona, and then a third came along, Kathy from Indiana. And these women, over a 2-week period, told me that they really wanted to help bring together women who would support us. I love this theme of stronger together. And they wanted to send email updates out about how people would be able to help us in the middle of this horrific journey. And none of the three knew each other. And so by email, I connected them, since all of them had the same purpose. They wanted to provide a support team for us. They eventually called themselves our stretcher bearers. You know, that whole idea of somebody carrying you when you cannot carry yourself. And we wound up with these three women putting together a monthly email update list on how people could pray for us. They talked about what our tangible needs were. And then they sent out just regular lists of things that people could do to help us during the crucial time from Jason's arrest until his trial. And Leslie, we went through 2.5 years and 7 postponements of Jason's trial, which was a very long wait. It was a long time to wait in the middle of this journey.
So how did you begin to even process your faith and all of that? Where was God? I mean, I imagine if it were me, I would be like, can I trust this God, you know, who you trusted so faithfully for all these years, and then your life flips upside down and it doesn't look like it's going to get back to normal, and you're going to have to live a new normal. You've written a book on that, but how did you trust God, or how didn't you trust God in those moments?
Well, in the beginning, it felt so terribly unfair. And Leslie, I was one of those people who came to know Jesus as my personal savior as a child. And even in high school, I remember always wanting to live my life for something that would outlast it. I wanted to live to make God smile. And I thought to myself, when this devastating thing happened, it was kind of like wanting to beat on the chest of God and say, God, I gave you everything. I've tried to serve you. I've tried to do my best. And yet you let everything fall apart for us. And it felt like he was unfair. And so I just want to say to everyone who hears my voice right now, you can tell God anything. And he is not going to say, oh, I'm really busy overseas today, or, you know, there are wildfires in California, there are hurricanes in the Gulf of Mexico. Don't bother me with your stuff. I'm busy. And it is so wonderful to read in scripture about the way David poured out his sorrow before the Lord. And it is okay to tell God you're even angry with him. And there were days when I said, Lord, I am just so upset with what you have allowed. Why? And there is something freeing when you allow yourself to express your sorrow and even your anger before the Lord. You start getting real with him. And in the beginning, I will be honest, it was really hard for me to read the Bible. I just felt like the words would blur on the page, or I would read the same verse over and over and over again. Because when you are in the middle of a crisis, it is very hard to even be able to read a scripture, let alone comprehend what it's trying to say and what God is trying to speak into your heart. And so I really started to not demand too much of myself in those early weeks. It was like, okay, if I can make it through one verse, that's good. And then I began concentrating on one verse at a time. And then I would write out my response to what I believed God was speaking into my life as a result of reading that scripture. And little did I know that I would wind up writing a 365-page devotional, He Holds My Hand, that's written in that way of God speaking His truth over my life through paraphrased scripture. But it was really a new way that I learned how to communicate with God in the middle of my desperation.
You know, one of the things that we talked about that I want you to share with these ladies is that like nothing's changed. Jason's still in jail. You're still, you know, you don't have the family life that you thought you were going to have. I mean, what's changed is you're not as cognitively, you know, traumatized anymore. You had to live with it. But share with our women a little bit about how you were able to. One of the things that we talk about and Conquer a lot is letting go of the outcome. Like, I'm sure all of these trials, the appeals, everything, we've talked about this, the outcome you wished for didn't happen, you know? And so these women are praying that their husbands come to Christ or their marriage is restored, and it doesn't happen. And so you're still left with loss and grief and uncertainty. Like, there's no certainty that I can't control what's going to happen. How do you deal with that tension, trusting God with being in the moment, being in your life, being in His will, and not knowing what's going to happen?
Well, Leslie, one of the things I soon realized is that my prayers were not being answered the way I was asking for things to be answered. And I'm pretty guilty of praying for what I want the result to be instead of really learning how to pray, God, in the middle of this situation, have mercy and thy will be done. I mean, that's one of those things we learn in the Lord's Prayer that we never think about right away. But Lord, thy will be done. And I found myself standing in these long 2-hour long visitation lines waiting to visit my son. And boy, I'll tell you, in Florida heat, or torrential rain, waiting for 2 hours just to go through the intake process in a prison is taxing, especially after you drive an hour and a half one way to get there. And I was just feeling like I was having pity parties all the time. And then I realized that my husband, Gene, was starting to make friends with some of the other inmate families, or he would talk to their children as we were waiting in line together. And one of the things in my desperation that was so important for me to learn is that I could stay locked up in my sorrow, and most people would say pretty legitimately, because it was awful to go through. And yet the other thing that I needed to do in order to be able to breathe again, in order to start making a step in a positive direction, was to eventually look around and see somebody else who needed help worse than I did at that time, and start to do something tangible to help them. And so we started to do tangible acts of kindness for the inmate families. And somehow, because we had a mutual pain, we had a loved one who was incarcerated, there was something that not only ministered to them, but it ministered to my heart. It brought me a sense of purpose in the middle of a very difficult journey. And I think sometimes, you know, my prayer was, oh God, please return my son to my Thanksgiving table with his family and all of the happiness around our Christmas tree together, singing carols and having a good time. No, I'll be back at the prison again on Sunday. I'll be there on Thanksgiving Day. And that's my life. Every single year on those holidays, I'm always at the prison. And I quit throwing pity parties. Not that I don't feel sadness, but I quit blaming God, and I quit just feeling so sorry for myself that I couldn't move out of the despair, and started to concentrate on just the simple question, what is one thing I can do today that will not waste this situation? And one of the ways I would just start to reach out, we started to make phone calls to family members of inmates who were hurting. And it was in helping others that we were helped and encouraged and finally found purpose in the middle of the pain.
Share just really quickly the cute story about Jean's t-shirt ministry. I just think it's such a cute story. And you went to the church of the, what was the church of the, what did you used to call it?
The church of the razor wire.
Razor
People say, well, where do you go to church now that you moved to Florida to be closer to your son? And we say, we go to the church of the razor wire. And they raise an eyebrow and they say, well, what denomination is that? And we let them know that visitation days are Saturdays and Sundays. So when we're out on the road or in another state with a speaking engagement, if we can possibly make it back for Sunday, at least by Sunday afternoon, then we get to visit Jason. And we have our little mini service around our table in the visitation area, which is a very precious thing to us. But I'd been noticing that my husband's black t-shirts, of which he had a lot, where that pile was getting shorter and shorter. And I said, Gene, what's happened to your t-shirts? And he said, oh, you'll find out soon enough. Well, what actually happened is that one day we were standing in line, that long visitation line, and I realized that a woman who was trying to get through security, who was ahead of us in the line, had been turned away. And I instantly knew why. Rules change in prisons all the time. And there was a new rule saying that women could no longer wear sleeveless blouses. And she, sure enough, had a sleeveless blouse on.
Right.
And she got turned away. Now, think about it. She'd driven a long way. She waited 2 hours to get to the front of the line. She now was turned away, and it is 20 miles to the nearest Walmart where she can buy something that will pass inspection. So she has to drive to Walmart, pick out the shirt, change her clothes, drive back to the prison in order to come to visit. You can just imagine how discouraging that is. Well, I was so focused on her, I hadn't realized that Gene had gone back to the parking lot. And I suddenly noticed that our trunk lid was open, and he had gotten out a black t-shirt, and he walked forward with it and he handed it to the woman. And he said, here, ma'am, put this on and go to the front of the line and have a wonderful visit with your family member. He said, it's my gift to you today. Have a great day. And she put that t-shirt on, and sure enough, she got right in and passed inspection. Well, Gene came back to where I was standing in the line. And I said, so that's what's been happening to your t-shirts. And he looked down, he said, it's my ministry. Well, I chuckled and I realized what had been happening to those t-shirts. Well, Leslie, a month later, I was in Elkhart Lake, Wisconsin, speaking at a weekend conference. And I shared that story since it had happened so recently. And about 4.5 weeks later, there was a big box on my front porch, and I opened it up, and inside, it was just filled with black t-shirts. And there was a note in the top. It said, Dear Carol, I met you at the retreat in Wisconsin last month, and I heard that story about your husband and the t-shirts. She said, I work at a place that makes t-shirts, and I can purchase them very inexpensively. And she said, please use this donation toward your husband's t-shirt ministry through his trunk distribution program. I hope it blesses some women along the way. We're praying for you. And Leslie, we started to find, I call it splashes of joy in the middle of our desolation. And I know one of the things we sometimes even feel false guilt about is when we actually smile or laugh out loud when everything is still pretty terrible. I mean, my son still has a life without the possibility of parole sentence. That's pretty terrible. But if you don't find the splashes of joy in the middle of your journey, then life gets too hard and you feel like you can't press forward. And so Gene's t-shirt ministry is one of those parts of our current life that brings a touch of joy and encouragement to others.
It's such a neat story. And I'm sure women are just loving hearing your story, but I bet they have a lot of questions. So I'm going to check over on my board here and see if there's any questions that they'd like to ask you. Hold on. Let's see. So if anybody wants to ask a question for Carol, there's some questions about the conference, but I'll answer those later. Anybody want to ask a question for Carol about her experience? So Carol, give us a kind of So you're going to talk about like how to, you use this word waiting room, and that's kind of the picture you're going to give women at the Conquer conference. Like you're in this waiting room, like you don't know what's going to happen, or you sort of see what's going to happen, but you don't like it. And how do you wait in the waiting room? And that's what you're talking about, looking for those flashes of joy. Any other one or two tips that you want to share?
Well, one of the things that's really important is don't try to wait alone. Even if you have one other person you can share what you're going through with, it will help so much. And if you don't know a trusted friend you can share what you're going through with, pray that God will reveal to you who that should be. Because when we start to share about what we are experiencing, it opens that other person up to share what they're going through. And suddenly you realize that you have a friend. And not only do you have a friend, but if you are both people who are believers in Jesus Christ, you have someone who will pray with you and for you. And that means so much. And the other thing that was really tough for me is that I was used to being on the giving end of compassion, and I needed to learn how to be a gracious receiver. And some of us are just so proud sometimes. We don't want to do that. And so when somebody reaches a hand and wants to do something for you in the middle of the sadness of what you're going through, whether it's to take you out for lunch or to treat you to a Starbucks card, or whether it's to come in and clean your house because you're so depressed you haven't really done that lately, or if it's to bring a meal in, let them serve you in that way. Because when we start serving each other, once again, we have that bond of friendship, and we realize we are not in this alone. We are in this together. We are stronger together.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the beauties of this group because, we're all in this mess of messy marriages, destructive marriages. And so there is this sense of, I trust that you know what my life is like because your life has either been there or is there.
Yes,
And
yes.
if you've taken 2 steps ahead of me, show me how to take those steps. And so
Mhm.
reaching back and pulling up our sisters, just like those people who minister to you, reaching back and saying, I've been there, and you reaching back now and saying to people, I know what this is like. And I think that's the beauty of God redeeming such an
Mhm.
awful situation to make it a different story than it might have been had you just let yourself have the pity party and stay in your house and close the blinds and say, I guess my life in ministry is over.
Well, it was a temptation, Leslie,
I
because
bet it was.
I I felt like I had a tattoo on my forehead that said mother of a murderer. And I thought, who would ever want me to speak to them again? And who would ever uh, hire me to work in their business establishment if they knew my son had made such a devastating choice? And I think when we allow ourselves to go negative and to start painting ourselves as this awful person who should be blamed for whatever happened, we wind up in real trouble. And that was something I needed to learn quickly, or I wouldn't have been able to keep breathing.
Yeah. And I think you just said something very powerful that I want our Conquer sisters to hear again and again and again, is that your son made choices that weren't your fault. It wasn't that you were a bad mother, but we tend to feel the shame of someone else's bad choices when we're connected with them, whether it's our husband's bad choices and he's had an affair, he's a porn addict, he's, a liar, he's whatever he is, and, abuser, or our kids make bad choices and they're addicted or they're, do something horrible like that. We tend to feel like it's stamped on us, like we are the failure. We failed to save them from whatever bad choice they were going to make. And we really have to learn to step back from that even God is a good father and people make bad choices. And so we can't put that on ourselves. And it's so good that you said that because it's tempting.
Well, I think that another thing that was so important to me is that I needed to quit listening to the lies of the enemy. And I would hear this little haunting question or accusation. If you had just read your Bible more consistently, this would not have happened.
Right.
If you had just looked ahead of time, You could have avoided all of this, and you could have saved your son from making such a horrible choice. If you'd been less busy, you could have concentrated on helping instead of letting this awful thing happen. And I think we forget sometimes that the father of lies wants to accuse us and have us feel like we are the ones who is responsible for someone else's wrong choice. And that can really take us down fast.
Yeah, it certainly can. In my life, I think because we're sensitive and we're caring and we're empathic, we can take on those things, and it's a good quality, and it can be a curse too. And so we have to have those boundaries and recognize when the enemy is seeking to put a responsibility for something that's not ours to take. It's still painful, but it's not our responsibility for what they've done. Anyway, let me just check and see if there's some questions. Carol, how long did it take you before you were able to write and speak about this difficult time publicly?
Oh, wow. I wanted to quit, but we had a problem. 1 year before our son's arrest, my husband had left his position in the insurance industry to work full-time with me in a traveling, speaking, and writing ministry. And so we had no income if I quit. And we had just hired a very expensive attorney to defend our son for this upcoming trial. And so I had to decide, I mean, were we not going to be able to pay the bills, or was I going to keep going? And 5 days after Jason's arrest was my first engagement. And it was a driving trip. It was a 4-hour drive to Ohio from Michigan, where we lived at that time. And I remember crying in the car. My husband, Gene, was driving. I said, honey, I don't know if I can possibly do this. This was such a bad idea, but I don't know how we'll pay the bills if I quit speaking. I don't know what to do. Well, we arrived just in time for me to have dinner with the worship leader for this event. And we happened to be at a table with just the two of us. And my heart was in agony. But as we were sitting there, she put her hand on mine and she said, Carol, I almost canceled. My husband and I have been in a full-time music ministry for years, and we're not making it financially. This week, we're losing our house and we're going bankrupt. And I can hardly look at my children and say, God's been faithful, because it doesn't feel like he's been very faithful to us. And I could hardly believe what I was hearing. And I couldn't even mouth the words of saying my son had committed a murder and we were awaiting trial, and that I was in the early shock of this. I just put my hand over the top of hers this time. And I said, I want you to know my husband and I are in the middle of a gigantic family crisis. In our case, it isn't our marriage, and it isn't what you've described as your situation, but it's huge. And I don't know if I'll make it through this weekend. Well, we walked over to the grand hall where the meeting was going to take place, and there were several hundred women there. And I remember she got up and led worship, and I sobbed through every song, because when you're hurting, your heart is so tender, you just can hardly make it through very moving, touching music. And then it was my turn to get up, and I had my Bible in my hand. And I stood on that platform, and I wasn't talking about the story. I wasn't talking about what happened. I was simply speaking truth out of the Bible. And I suddenly felt an empowerment that I can only explain in the supernatural dimension. It was as if I was stomping on the head of the enemy, saying, you loser, you meant to wipe the parents out with the kid, and you lose, he wins. And Leslie, from that point on, I knew it would not be easy, but I knew I would be able to make it through the next speaking engagement. And we had paid a very large upfront fee to our attorney, but then we owed him a lot of money every month. And every month we didn't know where that large sum was going to come from. And sometimes in the nick of time, or in the last 24 hours, there would be a gift from a dear friend. And there was never a month that passed that we didn't have just enough to be able to make that payment. And it was just a reminder that even though I had been disappointed in what God allowed, he was faithful and helped us during that devastatingly difficult financial time.
Was your first book after that, When I Lay My Isaac Down?
It was. And it took me, well, that came out in 2004. So it was 5 years from the time of the murder. So I began writing that about 4 years later. So Jason had been convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. And we were beginning living out the reality of what it means to what I call relinquishing what you love most to the God who loves your child, or in the case of many of our listeners today, loves your husband even more than you do. And that's hard because we just want to grab it tightly. We want to fix things. We want to be better. We want to somehow find a quick book on an easy fix. And sometimes we just need to realize we have to relinquish to God what we cannot control and say, Lord, I trust you with the outcome. Even if in this lifetime you don't allow me to know why you have allowed this to happen, I will choose to trust you.
Boy, that is so hard. And that is such a need for our girls to be able to know how to do that. And that was one of the reasons why I thought you would be the perfect speaker, because you've now lived this 20 years. It's not like this happened 5 years ago. This is now 20 years. And the situation is still the same. You still go to the Church of the Barbed Wire, you still razor wire, you still go visit Jason. And you said Thanksgiving, Christmas are very different. And so our girls need to know there's that crisis. And many of them are through that crisis. Sometimes the crisis you give yourself more grace for than being able to remake a life, reform what new normal looks like. And so we are so looking forward to you being our speaker. Let me just see if there's any other questions. Did your church support you?
Our church was very supportive. And I remember it was very hard to go back the first time. Obviously, for the first couple of weeks, we just couldn't even face the public. And it took 2 weeks for the news to make it into our local papers. And so a lot of people didn't know immediately. And I remember walking into the church lobby, and you get that sense of conversation ceasing as people realize you're there and they know what you're going through and they have empathy, but they don't know what to say. And one by one, people started coming up and hugging us. And then I realized that they were weeping with us as well, because they were feeling our pain as their own. And we discovered that we might have thought we were going to be judged, but instead, by the people in our church, we were loved and we were supportive. And I discovered that often people who did not give advice or quote Bible verses were the very best help to me. Those who had all the little pat answers, or those who would try to come up with something to say, often would say the wrong things. I remember one woman I had known for a very long time as a close friend. And she said to me one day, she said, you know, Carol, it's too bad that Jason didn't just shoot himself after he shot the victim. Then you would mourn for a while, but after a while you could get on with your life again. But the way this has happened, there's just no end to it, is there? And Leslie, I felt like saying, are you suggesting it would be better if my son were dead? Are you suggesting that if a man spends his life in prison, it is without purpose and without value, and that he can never do anything good for someone else or live for the Lord? I obviously kept my mouth shut at that point.
Maybe you shouldn't have.
My thoughts were just flying. And you know, at a much later time, she came and apologized to me and said she realized later what a horrible thing that was to say. But I think sometimes when we want to help people, we just blurt out the wrong things instead of quietly listening and coming alongside with just being a friend who is there. Physical presence is so important, so much more important than advice that we can't take in at the time, or somebody who just feels like they have to know 10 Bible verses in order to let you know what to do next. That can feel a bit much when you're going through crisis.
Did you ever feel judged by anybody? I know, as a Christian leader, I know that, for example, we're going to have Nachmed Penny in our conference too, and she was a Christian leader, the darling of Christianity Today, and Franklin Graham, when she was trying to get Saeed out of jail until she spilled the beans that he was an abuser, and then she became, the judged lowlife of, that same group. And did you ever feel from other Christians like, well, if you hadn't been so busy, if you hadn't had a career, Carol, if you had just stayed home and been a mother to Jason, he wouldn't have done this? Did you ever feel that kind of judgment?
There certainly were times when I did, but Leslie, when I was honest, I realized that sometimes I would misjudge someone's facial expression. that they weren't really saying that, but I was creating in my mind what they might be thinking. And I think so often we are accusing ourselves of being the cause of the problem. And so then we misinterpret the looks or expressions of other people. Overall, I would say people have been much more supportive than I ever expected. And for every one person who might have been judgmental or accusatory, there were 10 others who were kind. And so I choose to take that in the balance and say, Lord, thank you for putting people in my life who would pray with me instead of pointing a finger at me.
Yeah, yeah. I love that you talk about the stories that we make up in our head, because we've just been talking about that in Conquer, how sometimes somebody will say something and it's meant, kindly or innocently, but because of our own negative story in our head about our inadequacy or our unacceptableness or whatever, we tend to read into something that may not be quite there. So thank you for sharing that. All right, let me see. How is his wife and girls doing now?
Well, one of the things that happened is that for 6 years, they faithfully visited, and they were there most weekends to support him and encourage him. But it is very difficult for a young woman to know she will never again in her lifetime have a husband at home. And along came the hurricanes of '04. And 3 of the 4 hurricanes that hit Florida that year went directly through the city where our daughter-in-law and our granddaughters lived, and they caused massive damage. And our daughter-in-law is a licensed artist, and she had spent months painting beautiful murals on the bedroom walls of her girls. And there was warping taking place. The carpet was getting mold in it because the roof was leaking from the hurricane damage. And something in her spirit broke. And she came to us and she said, I can't go on like this. She said, I've decided to leave Jason. And when I leave the state, I will no longer be in touch with the 2 of you. And she left at that point, and we were devastated. I'll talk a little bit more about that at the Conquer conference, that to not only have your son incarcerated for a lifetime, but to lose your only daughter-in-law, your only grandchildren you'll ever have in this lifetime, and to have them leave you completely was an emotional, just a valley, a hole that just felt like this is something that hurts beyond anything I could even express. And they were married yet for 4 more years, and then they divorced. And I just want to say we have a whole lot of compassion for our daughter-in-law. It is very tough to be married to someone in prison, let alone married to someone with a life without parole sentence. And I think that probably my husband and I had unrealistic expectations of, how we could be such a great support for her that she'd make it all right. But she's chosen to go on with her life. And we realize that is a choice that she had the right to make. And we pray that God will bless her tremendously. And both of the girls are grown now, and they are very responsible adults. And it's exciting to see them going on with their lives in a very productive manner.
So that was a second huge loss. And, so it's so hard because you sort of get back on your feet. Okay, I'm going to trust you, Lord. We're going to make this new normal. And then, the rug's pulled out again. And so whatever little family you had left is gone. And so I'm so glad that you'll be talking about that, because some of the issues that our women face are parental alienation. So when they get divorced, their adult children turn against them. You've broken up our family, Mom. We don't want anything more to do with you. It's all your fault, just because she said I wasn't going to live like this anymore. Yes. And so it becomes very hard. Not only do you lose your marriage, but you lose your family. And so the stories that you're going to tell about all this during our conference are going to be so helpful to our women, because again, you are on not the other side of it. You still are living some of that still, but you're living it differently than you lived it at first.
Well, I'm living with hope now, because I have realized that one of the blessings in what we have experienced is that many, many people pray on an ongoing basis for our son, Jason. And here we are living in the year of COVID-19, and we have not been allowed to have visitation with our son since early March. And so we are in a situation where all we have are phone calls. And we are amazed when he calls and he's optimistic. And yes, there's COVID at his prison, but he has not gotten sick to date. And when we say, Lord, we rejoice in these small things, and we realize that he's using his leadership and his Christianity to bless the men around him. And so even in the middle of the big negative, incarceration, which is huge, we have several small blessings, and we can say, Lord, we rejoice in this. Lord, thank you that Jason can lead a Bible study. Thank you that he can work with men in the Gavel Club and teach them how to communicate. Lord, thank you that he has enough money in his account that he can share with inmates who have nothing. And so once again, when life and a marriage and circumstances throw everything negative against you, just realize that God can give you eyes to find the small victories and the tiny places where you just see his smile on your life and where you can praise him. And I guarantee if you start listing those, you'll be amazed at the good things he has brought your way, even though your big prayer request for complete healing of a marriage has not been answered. He is doing some pretty amazing things along the way if we just have eyes open to see them.
Well, thank you. And you are going to help our girls have their eyes wide open during the conference. And I so appreciate you. Let me just check and see if there's any other questions for you specifically. I think oops, wait a minute. Yeah, somebody here is just saying, I can't tell my Christian friends and family what I'm going through. They would not understand or agree. It's a lonely road. And for our women, it is. And that's one of the reasons why we grow stronger together here, because doesn't have to be a lonely road here, but it is hard to sometimes tell your church family that you're thinking about divorcing your husband when churches are so against that. So it's hard.
Mm-hmm. Very difficult.
Yeah. Anyway, Carol, I won't take up any more of your time. I'm going to stand for a few minutes just to talk about the conference, but you are welcome to get on with your day. I know you've given us a lot of time and I really, really appreciate it. And I am so looking forward to seeing you in October on our conference, on our virtual conference. And you're going to do it, I think, on Friday. And so we are looking forward to it.
Well, thank you so much, Leslie, and everybody. I look forward to seeing you at Conquer. Have an absolutely fabulous day. And I'm praying for you and for this conference. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Carol. All right, ladies, I think you got a little taste of the amazing Carol Kent, and she is just she's so real, and she's vulnerable, and she's honest. And I have just gotten to know her pretty well over the last 5 years, but I was in the outer ring of her life, but watched her. I watched her and I watched her, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, how does she do this? How does she do this? How does she do this? And so in her talk, she's going to do a lot of how-tos, because I think we struggle with what is the next step. And we want to have all those steps over with and be on the other side. But we need to understand that life is a process and it's a journey, and it's one step at a time. And she's never going to get to the other side where Jason comes home. But I want you to notice that the outcome of her story as Carol Kent and Jean Kent is much different than it would have been had she let Satan win. And Jason's story, she didn't go into this, but he's kind of a missionary in prison. He does Bible studies. He teaches men financial management. He teaches them how to read. I mean, he's just such a giver there to people who had no leadership and no mentorship from a healthy, good male, even though he made a very bad decision. So God is using him there too. And so the story has an outcome that we wouldn't have picked as mamas, but God is using and not wasting. But I want to tell you a little bit more about our Conquer Conference week. This week, we are promoting you to sign up now, because all of you want to get your little goodie box. It's going to have one of these wonderful Yeti mugs in it that says Stronger Together and a bunch of other fun stuff. And we need to order them by September in order to make sure we have enough quantities to mail out in time for you to get them in October. So we are going to open up registration for the Conquer Conference now. If you would like to do that, I'll answer some questions here. But it's leslievernick.com/virtual conference. And if you just go to that site, leslievernick.com/virtual conference, you will see the registration page. You will see the other speakers that are going to be there, the workshop leaders, and we're going to do some other Facebook Live. So this Wednesday, Ahmed will be doing a Facebook Live with us on Wednesday, and her story is fascinating. I've known her for about 5 years. She was even a secret Conquer member for a while she was going through the crisis of this. She didn't come public on the Facebook page, but she did do some of the videos and things like that. And then Wednesday night, we're going to have Jill Swanson, who's a totally different speaker, but she's been at every single one of our conferences, and she's an image consultant. And if you just want some help on the outside, like, you know, what kind of glasses look best with my face, or what kind of haircut would look better with me, or what colors look good on my body, or what kind of clothes look good on my body, she's an expert at that. She'll even take you shopping if you want. So come in Wednesday night for that. Chris Moles will be doing a Conquer Conference live with us on Friday night at 7:30 Eastern time. So we're going to have a number of different times this week where you're going to get to meet some of the speakers from the Conquer Conference. And if you look at the sales page on when you go to the Conquer Conference, leslieburdick.com/virtual conference, you'll see all the other breakout speakers that are going to be there that are going to have some really amazing content. You're going to learn, you're going to grow stronger together. We're going to have lots of opportunities at Zoom to break out into small rooms for you to connect with girls from your region, from pray together. We're going to have a prayer team who's going to pray with you. You can go to a prayer room after every session if something's on your heart that you need prayer for. So it's going to be a lot of amazing, wonderful things. And I just want to share with you just real quickly a couple of paintings I've been working on, because we always give door prizes at our Conquer Conference. And we'll be giving a lot of door prizes. Carol's donating a number per books, and I'll be donating books, and Chris is going to donate a book. But one of the things I do is I start painting. And so I'm going to show you some of the pictures that we have. So here's one, and here's another. They're not all done. And I don't have words on these girls yet, but here's another. And here's another. We're not really straight. And here's another. And she's going to have on her words, I think, I will trust you even when it's hard. I will trust you, God, even when it's hard. So as I've been looking at her eyes and her face, that's what she's going to say right here. So anyway, so I'm painting away. Finish this. I'm not quite finished with this one, but I'm not sure what she's going to say. But anyway, I've got a bunch of them in my garage. That's where I paint. I have a little table in the garage, and at night I go in there and paint. So these will all be door prizes at our Conquer Conference for you to win. And you're going to have bingo cards to fill out, and people who fill out those bingo cards and win bingo will have a choice of their paintings. And we're going to have a lot of fun. We're going to learn a Conquer Journey dance with the Conquer Journey words to it that we are writing at this conference, or we're writing now for the conference. So it's going to not just be content, but it is going to be a lot of fun. We have a worship leader, one of our own Conquer sisters is going to lead worship for us. And so we are going to have an amazing time, and you are not going to want to miss it. So if you want to sign up and get so there was an early bird price, which was $50 less. Now the next price is $50 less, and it will be starting September 1st. So, or starting, I'm sorry, this Friday is the deadline, Friday midnight at this price at $197. Saturday morning, it'll be at $247. All right. So we really want you to sign up this week so you can save yourself another $50. All righty. Tech is expensive. We have to hire a tech team there's about 20 women who are going to be managing all the Zoom rooms, all women, which I'm very grateful for, an all-female tech team, Christian women who are military wives. They worked on Carol's conference, and so she gave me their name, and they're amazing. And my tech team and other kinds of stuff that we need to just get all in place. And so we would love to know the number, because we have to get Zoom rooms to fit as many people as we have to do that. And with the Zoom rooms being taken with school and all the other things, we just want to make sure that we have everything in place, all of our products ordered. So I'm asking you to just sign up. If you're coming, sign up now. It would just help us to have that number in place so that we can order everything and know how many things we need to have in place, technology, so that everyone gets a great experience there. All right, so let me just answer a couple questions that were here, and then we'll go for today. Let's see. I really want to go to the conference, but worry about my husband retaliating for taking a whole weekend for myself. How can I explain that it's important to me? You know, I think it's really important that you value taking care of you. You know, I have a birthday next week. We have a Conquer call, and I'll be on the Conquer call on my birthday, August 31st, my birthday. And I've decided this year is a year of taking care of Leslie. I haven't always taken care of myself really well in terms of doing enough that I need to do to be as strong as I want to be, both physically, mentally. Sometimes I'm just giving too much, and I just need to pull back and take care of me. So this year is going to be the year of taking care of me. And that is something that's been hard. Like Carol, I've been a giver. and it's hard to receive. It's hard to receive. But sometimes the hardest person to give to is me, like for me to give to me. Like I've learned to let other people give to me a little bit, but for me to give to me. So I would encourage you, it's not your husband's permission that you need right now, it's yours. Like once you feel okay about giving yourself this gift of the weekend, both financially and time-wise, his disapproval won't mean so much. How many of you have gotten, go ahead, do what you want, and then you can't because you feel guilty or you feel like, oh, so it's really your own inner sense of unworthiness or your own inner sense of devaluing that you're saying you're not worth giving yourself 2 days. Plus, if you have to miss an hour or something, you have the recordings. We were recording every keynote and we are recording every workshop. What we won't be recording is there is going to be a lot of time for you to choose to go into breakout rooms with your Conquer Sisters. So if we have a Conquer room for Texas Conquer Sisters and you go off there, or the prayer room, we won't be recording any of those. Those are private chats that you can talk with your Conquer Sisters about, and those are not going to be recorded. But if we have a live session with Carol or Chris or me or our Conquer coaches or other workshop leaders, those will all be recorded for you. So if you can't make every single session, you can have the recording that is included in your price. But I do think being there is going to be different than just listening to the recording. Being there helps you feel that sense of growing stronger together. And I was just at not a live conference. I was just at a virtual conference 2 weeks ago. I've been going to a couple just to see what they're doing that I like. And I was shocked about how much fun it was. I didn't want to leave. I was like, what's going to happen next? What's going to happen next? There was all kinds of fun stuff going on and good learning, and I didn't want to miss anything. And so I did sit for 3 days, pretty much not missing anything. And so I think if you really commit to the process, you might find it being very amazing. And if you want to, we are trying to coordinate some Conquer Sisters who want to get together, like maybe go to someone's home for the day to watch it so that you're not so distracted by your home, or even rent a hotel and stay at a hotel and go to a room and watch it together and have your room and enjoy the weekend together as if we were really together, but we can't be all together because of COVID. So there's lots of ways of doing it, but I think the first person who has to really feel it's valuable and important is you. And once you feel convinced of that, then you can say to your husband, this is really important to me. I have felt, diminished, depleted, lonely, and I need this weekend for me to connect with my girlfriends, for me to grow stronger together with my female friends. This is really, really important to me. But you have to believe that first. And even if he says, well, I don't know, you can say, this is really important to me. I need to do this, versus, well, if you don't think it's important, I guess it's not important. That's where you've given your husband a lot of power over you. It's not that you're being selfish. It's that you're being a steward of you for 2 days, from 11 Eastern time to 7 Eastern time. It's not like from 5 in the morning till midnight. You'll have an hour and a half break, 1 hour for lunch, and then a 30-minute break also in between. So you'll have some time to go visit people or do lunch or whatever else you need to do. But we are going to jam pack this with lots of amazing things, so you don't want to miss it. All right, let me just see if there's another question here. Glasses. My husband controls the money. Anytime I ask for money to do something for me, he mocks me. How can I talk to him about justifying coming to the conference? I think I would say the same thing, is that, I think this is important for my growth and my spiritual development. I need some company right now. I've been pretty lonely with COVID. I need some community. I need to connect with other sisters who want the same growth trajectory I do. This is really important to me. And I think if you stick up for yourself, we've been talking about this for some time now. $197 is a lot of money for some of you, and for some of you, it's not a lot of money. But if you go on eBay and sell a few things, or you clean a house or two, or you do something for someone, babysit, or do driving, or, whatever you could do, with some tutoring for someone who can't do math and homeschooling and math, whatever. I mean, I think this isn't a ginormous amount of money to make. And if you need to make it because it's important to you to do it, then that's part of your Conquer journey of saying, I'm going to take responsibility for me. And if my husband won't give me the money, how else can I earn it? There's something very powerful in not feeling helpless and at the mercy of someone else's decision. So even if he doesn't want to give you the money, how can you earn the money? How can you get the money? How can you borrow the money until you can earn it so that you can get the $50 discount? I mean, those are things, I think those are part of your learning curve in Conquer, is how do I not be so passive? How do I not be so powerless? How do I not be so helpless? When an obstacle comes my way, my husband's objections, when an obstacle comes my way, I don't have enough money. What can I do to move through that obstacle instead of saying, I guess I can't because there's an obstacle? Do you hear the different kind of mindset that we're talking about? So when Martha texted me this morning, she said, oh, an obstacle, we can't get on Zoom because, all the school kids are on Zoom and it's crowded and all that. And, I said to her, okay, well, if we can't get on Zoom with Carol, maybe we'll do a phone call with Carol. I mean, I'm always thinking about ways to deal with an obstacle, not just, well, I guess we'll cancel Facebook, right? And so part of having confidence, which is our last step of the Conquer journey, part of having confidence isn't, I can fix everything and I can do everything and nothing ever is going to bother me. I mean, Carol was confident and she got knocked down. We get knocked down, but confidence is, I will get back up. I will figure out a way to live through this. I will do what it takes to get through this, right? And so it's not the confidence that I know everything now, but it's the confidence that I won't just stay helpless and not do anything. And so please don't let your husband be the final decision maker on what's best for you. If you had a lump in your breast and you wanted to go for a mammogram, or you needed to go for a doctor's checkup, or you had a temperature and you wanted to go to the ER and see if you had COVID, and he said, I don't want you to because I don't think you do and I don't have the money, would you let that stop you? Or would you say, this is my body and I need to steward my body and I'm going to need to do this? Yes, I hope you would. And so please don't let someone else make these kind of decisions for you. You are a grown-up. You're not a child. And part of you being here is that you've been controlled and oppressed. And part of you learning to rebalance that relationship is for you to stick up for yourself. There's not a prayer in the world that will help you change your marriage dynamics if you're not willing to do your work. All right. Your husband's not going to change from a controlling manipulator, oppressor, to a partner with you if you aren't ever going to speak up for yourself. If you aren't ever going to say, oh, this isn't going to work for me. This is important to me. This is my money too. Don't I have a say? I contribute to this family too. Even if I don't earn an income, I contribute with all kinds of housework and childcare and all that. I get access to some of this money for things that are important to me. Now, he may still not give it to you, but at least you've spoken up and said, it's not okay that I'm treated like a child here. I need to do something that's important to me. And then now, if that door is closed, what resources do you have to pull together if you want to come? We would love to have you come. All right, let's see if there's any more questions. Any ideas on how to pick up quick jobs to make the money to join the conference? Feeling stuck with kiddos at home doing school. I think there was lots of ideas on the Conquer Facebook page. So I would just ask Conquer Sisters, how have you started making money so that you can go? I think there's a lot of moms who are stuck at home. So if you are home and you can babysit some and you feel safe with doing that right now in your area, you can do that. You can run errands for elderly people. You can deliver groceries at a grocery store. You can sign up for Uber Eats and, spend an hour of your day delivering food or whatever. There's lots of things that you can do if you're resourceful. And I think this is part of what my goal in helping you to not be so helpless, just like I talked about. So I would encourage those of you sell things on, Craigslist, on, your neighborhood watch, if you have one of those neighborhood things where you can sell things, sell junk that kids' toys that are old, or take them to the resale shop. I think there's things that you can do to create some income if you want to. And that's being resourceful. If you want to go bad enough, then that's part of what you'll learn to do, right? I know this is last minute, but we've been talking about this for a while now. And so I really want you to not miss out. I really don't want you to miss out. All right. The conference is October 23rd and 24th. It's a Friday and a Saturday. It will start at 11 a.m. Eastern time, which if you're at a different time zone, switch your time head in your head. So it's going to start for me at 8 o'clock in the morning. All right. That'll start at 11 o'clock Eastern time, and it'll run to 7 o'clock Eastern time each day. There'll be an hour for lunch around the middle of the day, and there'll be a 30-minute break sometime in the second part of the afternoon, right? And the schedule will be out. You will get all that when we finish finalizing everything. But we would, 2 days, 11 to 7. You have an hour and a half break in there for doing other things that you might need to do. But other times we're going to be jam-packed. Everything is going to be recorded. So if you have to miss a session because of picking a kid up from school and you can't adjust that time, or you can't get someone else to do it, or you have to, go to a doctor's appointment that you've had on the calendar for 3 months and you don't want to cancel that, I understand. That's life. But that's why we're recording it for you. So your price of $197 includes attending the conference. It includes a wonderful gift box that you're going to get delivered to your home. So when you register, be sure to put your address that you want that box delivered to. Do not open it. It's a surprise box that we're going to all open together on Friday at our opening ceremony. And then it includes, all of our speakers, includes, your recordings. So you will get a lifetime access to the recordings. Those who do not come to the conference do not get the recordings, do not get to watch the recordings. That's part of the cost of the conference. And so if you choose to come to the conference, you get all the recordings of the workshops as well as the main speakers, not any of the discussion groups. Okay, those will be private so that you're free to really connect with your sisters in a way that doesn't, you don't have to worry about some person listening to it, like, that you don't even know. All right. So you are going to be in those discussion groups if you choose to go to those rooms. So kind of how it's going to go is we're going to have a main session, like, I'll speak, and then we'll have breakout rooms, and you might have 7 choices of where you want to go. So you might want to go to a prayer room. You might want to go to a chat room where you just talk with Conquer Sisters, or you might want to go to a workshop with Jill Swanson, who talks about image consulting, or you might want to go to a workshop with someone talking about mind body, how do you get your body under control when it feels like you can't get out of bed and your legs are all wobbly. How do you work with your body when you're traumatized, right? Uni is going to do a workshop on that. So you'll have a couple choices for workshops, a couple choices for a prayer or discussion or whatever you want to do during that second part of the day. All right, so we will do main session, workshop, main session, break, those kind of things. And you'll get a whole schedule once we figure it out. We haven't gotten that far yet. We've just got the speakers lined up and all that. So come to our next Facebook Live Wednesday morning, same time, 12 o'clock Eastern time, 9 o'clock. Nakmed will be speaking. She is Iranian. She was the one who was fighting for her husband, Saeed, to be released from prison during Obama's presidency. He was released, and then she had to then say, well, I want him released, but I want him to go in for treatment because when he was home, he was abusive. And that was so hard. Here she is, the darling of speaking out for her husband, and everybody embraced her. And she was, very well liked in the Christian community. And when she told the truth about what was going on in her marriage and said, we need help, then she wasn't so accepted. And so she knows what it's like to be in ministry, just like Carol, to be public and then speak the truth about what's really going on, uncovering the unfruitful deeds of darkness, not to shame her husband. She loved her husband. She fought for him to get released, but to get him help, which he refused to do. So she's got an amazing story, and she's been on this journey for probably 5 years now. So she's ready. I asked her actually for our last Conquer conference, and she said, I'm not ready yet. I'm not healed yet. But one of you asked how long did it take for Carol? Carol said it took her about 5 years. So I reached out to her again this year. I said, how you doing? Are you ready? And she said, I think I'm ready. So she's going to be sharing her story and her journey. And it's not overnight. Conquer is not, the 6-week success path or whatever. It's not like you're done in 6 weeks. Conquer is a journey. And most women who really do their work stay here for a few years because it takes time to implement. You can learn the truth, but actually walking in the truth is a whole lot harder, right? Like I'm learning to paint. For those of you who went to the first Conquer conference, you see a difference in my painting, right? Because I'm learning to do it differently as I'm learning more stuff, right? And actually doing it is better than just learning about doing it. And I don't always have the time to implement. So you're learning as you're going. And so don't rush the process, but keep walking in the process. And this conference will be an amazing opportunity for you to kind of get a shot in both arms. I don't know about you, but I need a shot in my arms. I was sharing with one of my coaches yesterday that I'm kind of feeling a little blue lately. And I think it's just loneliness. I think I feel, in the cabin here, I'm a little isolated. I don't have my girlfriends the same way I have back in my area. The sunshine isn't as sunny here because it's cooler, which I love. I don't want to be in 115 degrees, but it rains every day. And so I'm feeling kind of dreary, and I need people. I need to be with people. I haven't been on any of my speaking engagements. Everything's virtual. And so maybe you're feeling that way too. And even though our conference is going to be virtual, it is created to connect, because I do believe we grow stronger together, and we all need it. I need it and you need it. So please, please, please do what you need to do to be a part. We would miss you if you weren't. And you don't want to hear the amazing reports afterwards and saying, oh my gosh, I wish I would have come. Come, invest in yourself. All right, I will see you on Wednesday, same time, for our interview with Nakmet, and then we will continue Wednesday night with Jill. And if you want to look beautiful, you don't want to miss that one. All right, take care. God bless. Bye-bye.